began for me in Somalia, East Africa. The civil war had just broke out. When I arrived in the UK, I was bullied for being different, for being Somali. I was a very easy target to be picked on and hated school. But when I was 12, I found the boxing gym. I didn't want to be the girl that just quit and gave up. I love the thrill of getting in between the ropes. In competing for Somalia, I became the first boxer, male or female, to have won an African title for them. I had a dream of representing Somalia in Tokyo, but my journey has brought me here. I'm turning professional. The story continues.
And with that, Matchroom strengthens their stable and their commitment to growing the sport of women's boxing. We have Ramla Ali, we have Ellie Scotney,
who is set to be making her Matchroom Pro debut very soon. Ellie Scotney, like most every single professional boxer that is a professional boxer, was sidetracked by the COVID-19 pandemic, having shut down every organized sport that is an organized sport. Ellie Scotney, Ramla Ali, who is set to be campaigning in the super bantamweight division, both show promise and both show Matchroom's commitment to growing the sport. One must understand that Matchroom's not fucking around here. They're signing contenders, they're signing champions, they're signing amateur hopefuls. This is no experiment on the part of Eddie Hearn, on the part of Matchroom. These guys mean business, and they are invested in the sport.
And that's exactly what it needs.
An earnest effort, an earnest push, an investment. They're not just throwing ideas around, bouncing them off the wall at the Matchroom offices. They are paving the way for this generation and the next generation of women fighters. And I think that Matchroom's commitment to growing the sport is really only rivaled by people over there at Charlo Promotions, who have their own stable of fighters, very promising up-and-comers, world champions.
Like Dina Thorsland.
You know that very recently, Nisei Sarland, the brother of Cal Sarland, was available for comment, and he played with the idea of Dina defending her WBO title against Rachel Ball.
Listen, Dina's probably one of the best female fighters out there. She's got a very exciting style. Very hard-hitting and very explosive style. I mean, there's been rumors, and I think Eddie mentioned it as well, about a fight against Rachel Ball. This would be a great fight. I know Rachel Ball well because she gave Sanders, who's the mandatory for Terry Harper, a very good fight. So yeah, women's boxing's heating up, and I'd love to see if Thorsland comes through this. But Thorsland against Rachel Ball. Rachel Ball deserves a chance. She's a very good fighter. And she's got a very good trainer in Errol, yeah, I find women's boxing very exciting.
And this is what I'm talking about. Familiarizing the boxing community at large with the athletes. Doors opening for those athletes. World title opportunities. Platforms, major financial backing for these athletes.
That's what's been missing.
That is the service being provided by promotional outfits like Matchroom, promotional outfits like Charlo Promotions, Top Rank to a lesser extent. There are some American outfits that have yet to get on the dance floor and play their part. Better still, the sport itself now is in a better place than it has ever been, and it's growing. And I think it's because promoters and networks realize the human interest stories, the marketability of these athletes, it's all there. And Ramla Ali is just one example. A very compelling human interest story of how this fighter came into the sport and where the sport has taken the fighter thus far.
It's right out of a movie.
And I'll tell you something. This isn't virtue signaling. This isn't championing a cause for the sake of championing a cause, as that is rather disingenuous. I wouldn't get behind a product that I didn't believe in. But I believe in many of these fighters, and I believe in the sport of women's boxing because I think there is untapped potential there. The human interest stories for many of these athletes are just as compelling as what you get from the men's side of the sport. A lot of these fighters have the kind of marketability that those guys don't have, the kind of marketability that could bring a separate set of eyes to the sport, as many of these women fighters could moonlight as models.
And that can be useful.
The overall appeal of the fighter, of the athlete, whether it's by way of aesthetics, natural beauty, or human interest stories. The kind of compelling tales that pull at the heartstrings of the boxing community at large. One way or another, there's a lot to work with there.
And all it's going to take is a serious investment.
The kind of investment that Matchroom is making, Sarlin Promotions is making, Golden Boy Promotions, who have their own stable of female fighters. Sulem Urbina, Marlene Esparza, Sinicia Estrada, Franchon Cruz. Little by little, the sport is heading in the right direction, and I reiterate, I believe it's because the promoters, the networks, and the powers that be are starting to realize the earning potential the sport has if it's marketed the right way. If the same effort that is poured into men's boxing gets poured into women's boxing, it may turn out to be quite a fruitful endeavor, quite a fruitful investment. The fights themselves are plenty entertaining.
They are.
The problem is, if the fight fans don't know who the fighters are, and they don't even know when the fucking fights are happening, you're gonna go nowhere fast. That's why a major push, an investment, is needed. Now, Matchroom is definitely on board, and they are making that investment by signing fighters like Ali Scottney, Ramla Ali, Shannon Courtney, Chantel Cameron, Savannah Marshall, everything they've already done with Katie Taylor. What do you think? I'm some wide-eyed optimist? You think I'm wet behind the ears? You think I don't know that boxing is a business? Of course it's a business. And I'm telling you, these athletes are very marketable, very entertaining, and you can sell it!
Sell it!
The talent that makes the athlete an athlete at all. It is there. The substance, the skill, the potential, it's all there. You're talking about athletes that can put on the same kind of entertaining high-level matches that the guys can, with more marketability than the guys have.
There really is a lot to work with there.
In other news, per a tweet from Michael Benson, Jaime Munguia will face Tiriano Johnson in a middleweight clash on October 30th behind closed doors at Fantasy Springs, California. And if I'm being honest, this is the kind of fight that Jaime needs. It is just what the doctor ordered, though I wouldn't fault anyone for becoming impatient with Jaime Munguia. I understand the circumstances. Jaime Munguia is a former champion in the junior middleweight division. But one mustn't forget that he became a champion by fighting a guy who was out of place. By fighting a welterweight who had moved up in weight, that had not had the size, was not physically adept to the toss.
He wasn't.
Campaigning as a junior middleweight champion. Talking about Saddam Ali. Without condoning or condemning, merely explaining. If you're wondering why is it that they keep moving this kid so goddamn slow, it's because they view him as still being green, in spite of him being a world champion. And you can agree with that or disagree with that. You can accept it or you can reject it. But what we're doing here is simply trying to understand it. I don't know when the people over there at Golden Boy
And Zen for promotions.
are going to feel confident enough to allow their fighter, Jaime Munguia, to challenge the likes of a Demetrius Andrade, challenge the likes of a Rob Brandt, a Ryota Murata. I don't know when that's going to happen. And that's because I think of Jaime's age, I think of his performances, what limitations he has exhibited as a fighter, and I'll say that Jaime Munguia versus a Tiriano Johnson makes for a good scrap. But it makes for a good scrap because Jaime has not established himself as being head and shoulders above that fighter. The same is true if you put Jaime in there with Gabe Rosado. Gabe Rosado, who's an experienced vet, he's been in there with some of the best and brightest fighters the middleweight division has to offer. And that is a fight that also makes for a good scrap, but it's for the same reasons. It's because Jaime Munguia hasn't shown us that he is head and shoulders above these kinds of fighters. That's the situation. That would be the proverbial lie, as it were, that we might end up seeing Jaime in more of these kinds of fights with these kinds of fighters. I don't see Jaime Munguia challenging the upper echelon guys in the middleweight division for some time. You can take it how you want to take it. You can condone it or you can condemn it. But either way, I don't see Jaime challenging the likes of a Murata, a Brandt, an Andrade, the winner of a Charlo versus Derevyanchenko. I just don't see him having those kinds of fights with those kinds of fighters anywhere inside of 2 to 3 fights. I don't see it happening. You know, Jaime Munguia, He's 23 years old, this kid. I think about that, and I think about a fighter like Teofimo Lopez, who's also 23 years old, same age as Jaime. But there's a difference in how these fighters are being brought along. Teofimo's not being brought along anymore.
No, sir.
The training wheels have been taken off and were taken off the moment he walked into the ring with the hard-punching Ghanaian Richard Comey. And we see what Teofimo did to that guy. Currently, Teofimo, 23 years old, same age as Jaime, is on the precipice of greatness. He could become the lightweight division's next undisputed champion by locking horns with Vasyl Lomachenko and beating him if he does. That's where Teofimo is, you know? But that's not where Jaime is. That's not how they're moving him. It's for this reason I say, hey, you can accept it or you can reject it. You can condone it or you can condemn it. But that Jaime Munguia is being brought along and being brought along quite slowly, that is beyond reproach. That is beyond debate. That is what they're doing. And now it's time to address some of the particulars in association with this weekend's action. Particular to this conversation, the junior middleweight title fight unification match between world champion Jermell Charlo and unified world champion Jason Rosario. It just so happens that the winner of this fight has a very strong argument, strong enough to be integrated into the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list. That's right. Now, currently, in the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list, the weakest link in the chain is the three-division champion, hailing from Japan, Kosei Tanaka. Now, one might feel so inclined to ask, what makes the argument for the winner of Charlo versus Rosario a stronger argument than the current argument for Kosei Tanaka, three-division champion Kosei Tanaka, who's very accomplished in so few professional fights at such a young age? What sets the precedence for the winner of that fight to bump him off? Well, it just so happens that, in spite of Kosei being a three-division champion, 2 of the 3 world titles he's won throughout his career were vacant titles. The title that he won in the minimum weight division was a vacant title. The title that he won in the light flyweight division was also a vacant title. And it wasn't until Kosei arrived in the flyweight division that he actually unseated an active reigning world champion. An active reigning world champion in Sho Kimura, who was then in possession of the WBO title. Comparatively, the winner of this fight will have unseated 2 active reigning world champions to Kosei Tanaka's 1, in spite of Kosei having been a champion in more weight classes than the winner of this fight. The winner of this fight, regardless of who it is, would have unseated 2 world champions apiece. If Jason wins the fight, he will have unseated Julian Williams for the IBF and WBA titles and Jermell Charlo for the WBC title. If you put the shoe on the other foot, if Jermell wins this fight, he will have unseated Tony Harrison, the then WBC champion, and Jason Rosario, the IBF and WBA champion.
That's 2 to Kosei's 1.
Just as well, the winner of this fight will simultaneously be in possession of more world titles than Kosei Tanaka has ever held during a single campaign. Kosei Tanaka, as accomplished as he is, has never been a unified champion in any division he's ever fought in. The winner of this fight will be in possession of 3 of the 4 major titles at their prescribed weight, establishing a level of dominance that Kosei Tanaka has not yet established in any division he's ever campaigned in, thereby giving the winner of that fight a slightly stronger argument than Kosei's. I mean, they're all accomplished guys.
All of them.
They're all quality guys, all high-caliber fighters. But in this situation, the winner of this match really does have a slightly stronger argument, slightly more precedence to be ranked on this list than Kosei. Though the saving grace for Kosei is that he's supposed to be fighting Kazuto Ioka, who's ranked on this list. 4-division champion Kazuto Ioka. And if Kosei Tanaka is successful, which I think he will be, he will thereby bump Kazuto off this list, become a 4-division champion himself, and be thereby reintegrated as a result, per the rules that govern this. in defeating a pound-for-pound fighter, you become one yourself. In that situation, Kosei Tanaka will not have only beaten the same number of world champions as the winner of Charlo versus Rosario, but he will have been a champion in more weight classes than the winner of Charlo versus Rosario, thereby setting the precedence for him to be ranked ahead of them.
If it happens that way.
Though here today, in reference to the here and now, the immediate future, the winner of Charlo versus Rosario, the bona fide number 1 and number 2 guys in the junior middleweight division, having 3 world titles on the line in that fight, that sets the precedence for the winner of that fight to be ranked ahead of Kosei. It's a slightly stronger argument. It's not the tightest grip, but it's tight enough that the winner of that fight will secure the number 10 spot on this list. Now, I don't know what bearing, if any, this weekend's fight is going to have on you guys out there's pound-for-pound list. Maybe it won't reflect at all, but this list works a certain way with certain units of measure, certain governing criteria, and the winner of that fight, based on the logic, is set to make an appearance.
Like it or not.